What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. In this video, we are looking at the Week 11 NFL Draftkings and Fanduel final look. Hard to believe we're already in Week 11. The season is flying. We have a pretty fun week this week, I think, potentially looking that way. Obviously, we'll wait to see how the games are played, but we got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. As always, appreciate if you guys hit the like button on the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and yeah, let's get into it. So, quarterbacks this week, you got Taysom Hill. Everybody thought it was going to be Jameis Winston starting earlier this week, and then we just got word a couple of days ago that it's going to be Taysom Hill starting. And he gets a very favorable matchup against Atlanta defense that has just been getting blown up by quarterbacks. Taysom Hill also gives you that rushing ability, which is just going to be very nice to have at only a $4,800 salary. So he is the cheapest quarterback going this week. Potentially could have PJ Walker going. Depending on Teddy Bridgewater is going to be a game time decision, but Taysom Hill has just a lot of upside. Both him and if Walker does end up starting, both have a lot of rushing abilities. But I like Taysom Hill in his matchup against Atlanta Falcons. Has Michael Thomas, has Kamara, has good weapons around him. So I think he should be able to produce, be one of the top value quarterbacks, potentially be one of the higher scoring quarterbacks. Not expecting him to drop 30 fantasy points, but maybe get you high teens, low 20s, and at 4,800 will allow you to pay up at other positions, which will just make him, I think, worth it. Joe Burrow is 55 against Washington. I think he looks strong as well as a cheap play. We've seen him have more of a tournament play because we've seen him have really good games and really, some games he's just not going to give you that cash game floor, but definitely has a tournament upside, and it's a okay matchup against Washington. I love Cameron Newton this week. Cam Newton is 6,200. He is going in to face the Texans in a dome. So, coming off of a weather game that was just really bad, and especially in the fourth quarter, just couldn't see the ball. I think he was fine in that game. Led them to a win. Didn't make any mistakes. He's been pretty good the last couple of weeks, taking care of the football, and I think that it's a really good matchup against Houston. They have one of the worst defenses in football against the pass. They are not great against the ground either, so we could see Cam Newton, who does have that rushing upside, I think have a pretty solid week this week. Then Watson, I think that game looks pretty appealing to stack it up. Watson is 6,500 on Draftkings. That is one of the cheaper price tags you'll see for Watson. He's been playing pretty well the last few weeks, and some of these matchups haven't been great, but also the wind and the weather has been not great for him a couple starts. So I think that going in a dome at home, he's just going to help him against the Patriots. Ben Roethlisberger has the highest total on the slate. His Steelers are going against Jacksonville, who we all know we've been picking on Jacksonville all year, and that's not going to really change. The Steelers, there are some risks that they just run the football in the second half, but similar scenario last week, they were up by like 4 touchdowns and 3 touchdowns, and they still threw the ball a lot. So I do like Roethlisberger. He has 3 amazing wide receivers, and I think he looks like a guy that you can stack 2 of them with, or even at least 1, but definitely you could even do a 2-man stack with him, or a 3-man stack with him and Claypool and Johnson. Lamar Jackson, just because he's 7,300, it's a good matchup against Tennessee. He hasn't had that giant upside ceiling that he flashed last year, but I still think he's going to be in consideration, and he has to be in consideration at 7,300 in your player pool against Tennessee. Moving on to running backs, I think the strategy that a lot of people implement this week is going cheap at quarterback with maybe a Cam Newton or a Joe Burrow, but probably going to be a Taysom Hill, and then load up on the 2 running backs, the 2 stud running backs that are in good spots in Kamara and Dalvin Cook. That's going to be probably the main build that people go to, and I have no problem doing that. Both guys give you this tremendous upside because both are not only great guys on the ground, but they also can lead their team in targets, and both have really good matchups. Like Dallas has been getting gashed on the ground. Atlanta, they are vulnerable in both facets, and Kamara has upside to potentially get 10 targets with Taysom Hill. When it was Winston starting, there was some risk that Winston doesn't like to do checkdowns a lot. He'll just keep throwing deep. But I think Taysom Hill, they're going to keep Kamara involved heavily in this game. So I think both of those guys are probably 2 that you want in your cash game on DraftKings. Miles Sanders, he had 2 touchdowns that he probably could, at least 1 that he could have had in the 10, and then Boston Scott ran 1 for 50-plus yards, but they just haven't been giving him some of these red zone looks. They gave it to Corey Clement. Sanders did get them like 10 or 11 yards on the previous play, but I still think he's in play this week because if he does get does get those red zone carries, then he's going to be one of the better running backs under 7K. Fine matchup against Cleveland. There is some rain in this game, so they're probably going to have to stick a little bit more heavily on the ground game, which is pretty good for Miles Sanders. Antonio Gibson against Cincinnati. That is probably one of the sneakier game stacks, just because both offenses are not like lighting it up on fire, but both sides have really cheap. Like they have some cheap players that have some upside. Like Cincinnati has Joe Burrow. On Washington, I like Gibson. They still have McLaurin. T. Higgins has been playing well. Green is still under 4K, although probably deserving so at this point, but still. But Gibson coming off of 2 touchdowns when the Redskins the Washington football team made their fourth quarter run last week against Detroit. I think that he's going to continue to get a lot of involvement on the ground. He's going to get some good targets in the passing game. They just don't have any other receiver that gets a lot of volume besides McLaurin, so they use the running backs a lot, which is good to see. Gio Bernard, Joe Mixon is still out against Washington, so definitely like Giovanni Bernard. He gets most of, not like 60-70% of the workload on the ground, gets some targets. He is utilized in the red zone, which is what you want. Under 6K, he looks pretty strong as well. And then Salvin Ahmed, nobody knew who he was like before last week, where he had the surprising, well, not surprising, I guess he was good in college, but don't think he was drafted, had a pretty good showing, and he's probably going to be he's definitely going to be their main guy again this week with still Gaskin on IR. Against Denver, their defense is missing some of its better pieces, and they have not been the best on the ground, so you could definitely play him as a cheap play. And then the Lions are super banged up this week. No DeAndre Swift, who was looking like one of the other guys that you could play at running back this week earlier in the week. He's out. And so it's going to be Adrian Peterson getting most of the work. They have Kerryon Johnson back there as well, but Johnson hasn't been getting a lot of snaps. He's been third guy. And they like to use him more in the passing game, so I think Peterson is going to be in the game on all first and second downs, and then probably get a lot of the short yardage situations and maybe in the red zone as well. Wide receivers, you have Marvin Jones as a tremendous play this week against Carolina, and that is because not only they're missing Kenny Golladay again, but they're missing Danny Amendola. So 2 out of their top 3 wide receivers are out this week, so that makes Marvin Jones the clear number 1 option for him. There's no other second guy besides Hockenson in that offense. Matthew Stafford is in, which is great news for Marvin Jones. Those two have some chemistry. They go back a lot of years, so I think he is one of the better wide receiver options to plug in this week. Kobe Myers, I still like him just because if you're going to be jamming in both Cook and Kamara, you're going to need some savings, and that's where Myers comes in. He's going to get you like 8 to 10 targets. It's a good week for Cam Newton to get some of his passing yards going and maybe get some passing touchdowns going because he only has 3 of them this year. But Myers has been his guy. He's locked into him just like he locked into guys like Funchess back when he was in Carolina. He's really locked into Myers, and he's been their best player on offense at wide receiver. And then Marvin Hall is the second Detroit wide receiver that's on this list. I think Marvin Jones is a tremendous play, and the other Marvin Hall is also a solid play just because he's going to get some targets. He's going to be out on the field in all wide receiver sets, and he's only 3,800. Then this week, Draftkings has a lot of good value plays in the 6K range. You have Adam Thielen, who's only 6,300 on Draftkings against Dallas. You have Will Fuller, had only 6,200 against the Patriots. I'll see if Stephon Gilmore is a go or not this week, but still, I think Will Fuller's underpriced. It's a week where Watson can definitely throw the ball downfield and take some shots, which he couldn't do last week in that wind game. And then 2 wide receivers I don't mind paying out for this week are Keenan Allen, just because that was his first week last week, where he didn't have 10-plus targets with Herbert as their quarterback, and now he's facing the Jets, so I think that's definitely going to go back to getting you 10-plus targets this week, potentially get a touchdown or 2. And Terry McLaurin, just really 69 and 73. He definitely has a lot of chemistry so far with Alex Smith. And I think that, against Cincinnati, is going to be a good week for him to continue to pile up the production. Tight ends this week. On Fanduel, I don't even have the Fanduel prices on here because on Fanduel, if you're playing, you got to play Taysom Hill. You'll never, ever get a quarterback at tight end position, probably ever. And you got Taysom Hill as the min-price tight end on Fanduel, so he's going to be super popular, but I just don't see how you do not play it. Tight end as a whole is not a very thrilling position. A lot of these times, guys are getting you under 10, under 7, under 5 fantasy points sometimes. So you got a guy in Taysom Hill who's going to be getting those rushing yards, going to be getting passing yards, potentially passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns if he gets one that way. He's just too much upside, high floor, high ceiling. There's no real risk with him unless he just gets benched for poor production or somehow he gets hurt. But other than those two things, I see him being a smash play on Fanduel. You got to play him there. Then on Draftkings, you can play Logan Thomas. I like at 3,300. Just been looking pretty good with Alex Smith, getting good amount of targets. He has been utilized heavily in the red zone too, so that's a good sign. You have Goddard with still no earth for the Eagles at 38. You got Hooper in a bounce back spot, but some weather in that Philly game. Nothing crazy, but just some rain. And then you have Hawkinson, just with how banged up the Lions are. You got to consider him. And I think if you're paying up, you look at Andrews or potentially Hunter Henry, but I'd like Andrews more. And the defenses this week, you have the Steelers against Jacksonville. They're going to be somewhat popular. I think if people go super cheap at quarterback and have some salary, they're going to pay up for them. But I think the Dolphins are going to be one of my favorite defenses. Their defense has been putting up some points quietly, having a very good season. Now they're facing Drew Lock, who has a lot of interception problems, turns the ball over. I see them potentially getting you a defensive touchdown. That's super random, but I see them having a chance to have a pretty good week on the defensive side. Then we have the Browns and the Eagles, just with the rain in that game. We could see some turnovers. Both quarterbacks are sloppy, especially Carson Wentz, leading the league in interceptions this year. And the Broncos, you could even play them against the Dolphins just because they're super cheap, 2,400. But I like the Dolphins more if I had the cap. And that's kind of it for this week. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and best of luck this week.